Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us. We have two wonderful poets with us today, D.A. Powell and Boris Dralyuk. D.A. will read first, and then Boris. D.A. Powell's books include Chrome, Repast, and Useless Language, or A Guide for Boys, all from Grey Wolf Press. In addition to teaching at University of San Francisco for the past 20 years, Powell has taught at Harvard, University of Stanford, Columbia, UT Austin, and University of Iowa. His honors include the Kingsley Tufts Prize, the Lyric Poetry Award from the Poetry Society of America, the Shelley Memorial Award, and the Academy of American Poets, a National Book Critics Circles Award in Poetry, and fellowships from the NEA and Guggenheim. Here's a brilliant poet, D.A. Powell.
Thank you so much, Harry. I'm so glad to be able to join you today. You know, I was called up for jury duty yesterday, and I reported, and fortunately it was a civil case, and it was over in an hour. So I didn't have to miss this wonderful opportunity to talk with you and to read with Boris. So every once in a while, something good happens in the universe. People settle. We need more settling and less litigation. But damn it all, you know, people always make us need to go to court. I'm going to read, I'm going to start with some older poems from Chronic and from Useless Landscape. Just because once in a while it's good to look back, and I've been surrounded this month by California poppies everywhere in San Francisco, those beautiful pale flowers. So I wanted to begin with this poem. It's called California Poppy. Shuddering back to this coastline, craggy old Goat Rock, or the sweep of dune where Judah meets Squid Ink Pacific. No more the nomad for now, or stubbornly everywhere, as each exotic dancer filling the cracked sidewalks of North Beach, as the indigent waving his tattered placard on the island, what we call this Meridian, near Church and Dolores, where the fronds of palm trees are stippled with shrill green or yellow lorikeets saying, "Come to my island, live cast-off cargo on this desolate reef." As the transmissible fruit fly larvae ravaging local oranges, as a fragile head upon a thinning stalk that somehow manages to clasp hands at evening and send up its muttering entreaty. So small you might not notice, so ubiquitous, you see so many ugly little flapping faces poking city car lots. The freeway on-ramps, the piss-scented flower pots, the unclaimed and untended, so few, and yet they're dense with the wispy strands of hair and the folds of sallow tents. That you've your right to ignore them, to ignore the grasping fingers and bloated waxy face of the wildly surviving thing that once was somebody's boutonniere, somebody's flash of light, trail of phosphorescent street lamps punctuating the homeless night. The only thing that really held Chronic together as a formal device was that all of the poems had titles that either began or ended with the letter C. This poem is called Republic, and it is a sort of survey of what the California landscape and many agricultural landscapes are going through in this transition from small farms to large industrial farms. Republic. Soon industry and agriculture converged, and the combustion engine sowed the dirt-clogged truck farms green with onion tops and chicory, mowed the hay, fed the swine and mutton through belts and chutes, cleared the blue oak and the chaparral, chipping the wood for mulch, backfilled the marshes, replacing buckbean with dent corn, removed the unsavory foliage of quag, made the land into a production, made it produce, pistoned and oiled and forged against its own nature. And with enterprise, built silos, stockyards, warehouses, processing plants, abattoirs, walk-in refrigerators, canneries, mills, and centers of distribution. It meant something, in spite of machinery, to say the country, to say apple season, though what it meant was a kind of nose thumbing and a kind of sweetness, as when one says, how quaint, knowing that a refined listener understands the doubleness. And the leveling of the land, enduring it in sameness, cured malaria as the standing water in low glades disappeared, as the muskegs drained, typhoid and yellow fever decreased, even milk sickness abated, thanks to the rise of the feeding pen, cattle no longer grazing on white snake root. Vanquished the germs that bedeviled the rural areas also vanquished, made monochromatic and mechanized, made suburban. Now the illnesses we contract are chronic illnesses: dyspepsia, arthritis, heart disease, kidney disease, high blood pressure, asthma, chronic pain, allergies, anxiety, emphysema, diabetes, cirrhosis, Lyme disease, AIDS, chronic fatigue syndrome, malnutrition, morbid obesity, hypertension, cancers of the various kinds, bladder, bone, eye, lymph, mouth, ovary, thyroid, liver, colon, bile duct, lung, breast, throat, and sundry areas of the brain. No better at accounting for death and no worse. We still die. We carry our uninhabited mortal frames back to the land, cover them in sod. We take the land to the brink of our dying. It stands watch, dutifully, artfully, enriched with sewer sludge and urea, to green against eternity of green. Hocus pocus. Here is a pig in a farrowing crate eating its own feces. Human in its ability to litter inside a cage, to nest, to grow gravid, and to throw its young. I know I should be mindful of dangerous analogy. The pig is only the pig, and we aren't merely the wide open field flattened to a space resembling nothing. You want me to tell you the marvels of invention? That we persevere? That the time of flourishing is at hand? I should like to think it. Meanwhile, where have I put the notebook on which I was scribbling? It began like the smell of droppings and that narrow country road. Sometimes you write poems and you think, well, this is going to be obsolete in 10, 20 years. But it turns out worrying about communicable diseases in crops and farm animals is actually even more crucial now than it was then. All of those problems that we were solving with technology, we are now abandoning with political posturing. So this poem I wrote, this was in Chronic, so it came out in 2009, a long time before COVID and some of the other recent diseases that we've had to deal with. I did not know that it was going to be a predictive text. I thought that, I was writing in the style of the apocalyptic prophets of ancient times, where you speak about present day things in future tense. I was writing about the AIDS pandemic, but also what comes next, not knowing what comes next. This is called For the Coming Pandemic. Bootless prayer, his tongue swell up. Godspeed our sleeper. Goes the air through his slackening cheeks. Another degenerating, a third ashen, another yielding of a sudden. Good sir, I let you ravish me with your meaty hands. Throw down your crummy bag of tricks, he mumbles in this manner, if he mumbles at all. Delirium, parlance of stinging nettles. And now the speaker who cannot speak is a concert of voices, squelched, put down in the roads between shanties, put down on paltry stretchers in corrugated tin towns, makeshift clinics. Lands divided into plats, the tenants put out beyond the gates. And in the midst of crowds and under every eave and entryway, one hears the addled noise from occluded windpipes and the sucking tongues cleaved to the ceilings in parched mouths. And the palaces are not saved either, though they are palaces, and even the hospitals in fine neighborhoods are inundated. From above, diving beaks and bird claws, drawn by the scent and lush carnation of the vivid sores. The meat bees, too, gathering to the great banquet of humankind. To the tender child, take our tranquilizer. Take our anti-nausea, our generic course of treatment, nutritional supplement. Take this little bit of water for your thirst. Purified, the stream of your infancy diverted, treated, was never the stream with its waterfall alighting. Gurgle goes saliva through the trachea. Godspeed to the pinworms and the mold spores. Godspeed to nimble fingers that sew this new, fine suit of clothes. Also, one of the things that we are experiencing sooner than we thought, as my teacher Robert Grenier would say, sooner than I thought. Sooner than I thought. The weather is getting far worse than we thought it would, faster than it would. This poem takes its title from a Bananarama song, or if you're British, Bananarama. It's called Cruel, Cruel Summer. Either the postage stamp bright in fluorescence of wild mustard, or the drab tassel of prairie smoke waving its dirty garments. Either the low breeze through the cracked window, or house flies and drawn blinds to spare us the callid sun. One day commands the next to lie down, to scatter. We're done with allegiance, devotion, the malicious idea of what's eternal. Picture the terrain sunk, return of the inland sea, your spectacle, your metaphor, the scope of this twiggy dominion pulled under. Crest and crest, wave and cloud, the thunder blast and burst of swells. This is the sum of us. Brief sneezeweed, brief yellow blaze put out. So little your departure, one plunk upon the earth's surface, one drop to bind the dust, a little mud, a field of mud. The swale gradually submerged, gradually forgotten. And that is all that is to be born of your empirical trope. First, a congregated light, the brilliance of a meadowland in bloom, and then the image must fail, as we must fail, as we, graceless creatures that we are, unmake and befoul our beds. Don't tell me deluge. Don't tell me heat, too damned much heat. This is a more positive spin on these agricultural concerns. This poem is from Useless Landscape, and it is a portrait of that part of the Central Valley that I spent my teenage years in and early adult years. And I was inspired by a film called Tender Mercies, where Robert Duvall plays a country singer who is down on his luck. He has been through some addiction and some hard times, and he is starting over again. And I felt when I was writing this book about this place that was so important to me, and also felt like a trap, you know, when you're a child and you're stuck in the middle of nowhere and you really want to just go find people to enlighten you and have a good time and have some sex. So the movie is called Tender Mercies, and the poem takes its title from that. Tender Mercies. The dandelions, ditch-blown brood, the evening snow and dew-soaked flocks, the brewer's pea, the Jepson's pea, these the bright eyes of the Viridian fields, in chaparral, the hillside pea and angled pea, intensities of light and pomp, the distress, the easy upswept grass, the smack the rain plants as it smudges past and penetrates the canvas. The smattering on field and railroad tracks, both hardy blooms and dainty flowers, the judge's house, the chicken farm, a migratory camp, a flesh motel, a stucco digs where all that mitigates the August swelter is the swamp cooler's immutable burr, a straggling house that draws its water from a hard water well and flushes out with the help of a crude sump pump. Before the flat land is occluded by the staunch of light at end of day, I wanted to be content with all its surfaces. Weed, barb, crack, rill, rise. But every candid shoot and fulgent branch depends upon the arteries beneath. The houses have their siphons and their circuit vents. The heart, the literal heart, must rely upon its own plaqued valves. The duodenal canal, its unremitting grumble. The brain, upon its stem and underneath, a network vast of nerves that rationalize. The earth's a little harder than it was, but I expect that it will soften soon, voluptuous in some age hence, because we captured it as art the moment it was most itself, fragile, flecked with nimbleweed, and so alone it almost welcomed its own ravishment. I was a maiden in this versicolor plane. I watched it change, withstood that change, the infidelities of light, the solar interval, the shift of time, the shift from farm to town. I had a man that pressed me down into the soil. I was that man. I was that town. They call the chicory ragged sailors here, sojourners who have finally returned and are content to see the summer to its end. Be unafraid of what the future brings. I will not use this particular blue again. And then I was going to read one more like that, and I thought, okay, that's enough. Sometimes you're just, I think I'll just move on to something a little bit more uplifting. This poem is called The Imaginal Stage. The imaginal stage is the stage in which an insect becomes an imago. So it's not imaginal in the sense of our imagination. It's imaginal in the sense of the insect moving from larva to adult. And this imaginal stage is the stage when the insect reaches its full promise as bug. And one of the insects that does this is the mayfly, which spends most of its life as a larva. It's larva, 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 and then imaginal, imago, and then, it mates and dies all in one day. The imaginal stage. Turns out there are more planets than stars, more places to land than to be burned. I have always been in love with last chances, especially now that they really do seem like last chances. The trill of it all upending, what's left of my head after we explode. Are you ready to ascend? In the morning, I will take you on the wing. And then I'm going to end with a poem that I did read. I don't know if it was last time I was on Harry's show or the time before. But it's a very different kind of poem. Harry and I and a bunch of other wonderful poets are in this anthology that I can't quite get on my screen. The anthology is called Poetry Goes to the Movies. Oh, I can see it there. Poetry Goes to the Movies. And so these are movie-inspired poems. This one is one of mine. It's inspired by the character from the Tarzan and Jane movies of the 1930s. Remember, the Tarzan series started before the Hays Code went into effect. And so in the early movies, we get to see Jane's beautiful body swimming nude in the wonderful lagoon located in Florida, where they shot the films. And when Tarzan and Jane got together, they're in the jungle, so no one can marry them. So in order to not have them having a child out of wedlock, the child falls from the sky in an airplane. And then they had the child that they named Boy. This is called Boy Grows Up. Tarzan and Jane have a boy. His name is Boy. He runs away from the jungle with his elephant and chimp. He hopes to buy a plane like the one they found him in, the night he fell from the sky like the child of a Greek god tossed off of Olympus. Civilization dumped him, yet he longs to be let back in. And when they let him, why, it's just the circus tent for him. He runs away again. Away he runs. Boy on the waves, boy on the rails, boy tucking tips in his underwear, which he only wears to work. When will he be free again? After 10, says Boy. Boy gone wild, gone long in the tooth, but all boy, this boy called Boy. As you'll see in the sequel, Boy on the Sunset Strip.
Thank you, DA. You know, your poetry, your reading is mesmerizing. There's so much grace and clarity, and, you know, you deal with the body, the land, time, and you just have so much erudition. Your language is sublime, and you're very compassionate. You know, it reminds me of what Harold Bloom said of Keats. You know, he was the most least solipsic poet there is, and you really see so much out in the world and then also in time. So thank you for that. You're just such a wonderful poet, and I love your poetry. We have time maybe for one question, and so I will give you two questions and just answer one of them that you would like, and then we have to go to Boris. But the one question that I always, what book of poetry do you return to often, number one, or what foreign film, you know, what are a few of your foreign films that you love to watch?
Well, I'll try to answer both very succinctly. Right now, I'm reading or rereading Cavafy in a translation that I hadn't read before. And, you know, Cavafy was one of these poets whose work really didn't become popular until after he died. He wrote in notebooks, and he chronicled the time in which he lived, in which there was much political upheaval. And he was writing about desire and bodies, and also just, you know, the changes that the world was going through. I just watched night before last, The Baker's Wife by, is it Claude Pignol? Marcel Pignol. And I have to say, periodically, I love to go back and watch. Many of the actors in The Baker's Wife are also in the trilogy, Darius, Cesar, and Fanny, the Marseille trilogy. And it just feels like I could live in that world. I know it's probably really hard to be a fishmonger in Marseille, but I love those movies so much.
Well, I know you love movies as I do too, and Boris does too. So it's always a great pleasure to have you on the show, to put it mildly. You know, Cavafy also, you know, his myths, you know, the Greek myths are also in his poetry, and he is great. So I'm glad to learn a little bit more about your taste, and you have great taste. So once again, thanks, D.A. Powell.
Thank you, Harry. Thank you so much.
Before you reintroduce me, I just want to say that I agree with everything you've said about D.A.'s work. It was mesmerizing and truly soothing.
And such clarity. Thank you, D.A. once again. And Boris Dralyuk is the author of My Hollywood and Other Poems 2023, and the translator of Isaac Babel Andrei Kirkov, and other authors. His poems, translations, and criticism have appeared in the NYRB. I just read his wonderful poem, The Diabik, in the New York Review of Books, the TLS, the New Yorker Best American Poetry 2023, and elsewhere. Formerly editor-in-chief of the Los Angeles Review of Books, he is an associate professor of English and creative writing at the University of Tulsa, a Tulsa Artist Fellow, and the editor-in-chief of Nimrod International Journal. Here's a marvelous poet, Boris Dralyuk.
Thank you, Harry. And thank you again, DA. I'll begin by saying that although I am in Tulsa right now, and Tulsa has been a wonderful home for me, I am a Los Angelino at heart. It was home for 30 years, more than 30 years. And so returning even in this virtual form to Southern California is a great gift for me. I'm very happy to be here. Shortly after my book came out, I had this deep sense that I would never write another poem again. But it felt like a lifetime's work completed, and there was no need to say anything else. But the poems kept coming. And at this stage, I hope to share mostly new poems, but I'll begin with a poem from the book because it's a good segue to some of the recent work that I've been doing, and also because it resonates with some of the themes in DA's poems. Although DA's poems were so sublimely rural and so in touch with the natural world, I'm a very urban fellow, but we're both concerned with matters of health and disease and the decay of bodies and the perseverance of bodies. And this is a poem that came out of an experience during COVID on Hollywood Boulevard. I worked for a long time at the LA Review of Books, which was headquartered at the crossroads of the world, that glorious Art Deco, somewhat strange, unreal structure on Sunset Boulevard, an old shopping center made to look like a ship on dry land. And just a block up from the complex is Hollywood Boulevard, and not very far from the place where my street intersected with Hollywood is a tiny little alley called Artisans Alley. And it is the home to the oldest memorabilia store in continuous operation in Los Angeles. And that memorabilia store closed briefly during COVID. And I had this eerie experience of walking down the street, down Hollywood, in broad daylight, completely deserted. The street was, not a single soul in sight. And I just looked through the gated alleyway, and at the very end of the alleyway, I saw some posters for old horror pictures. So this is Universal Horror. All through the first great war to end all wars, the siren-addled nights of its successor, up till last week, the sun-baked, time-warped doors of one slim passage welcomed every passer-by. High noon, yet no one passes by. Magnetic trinkets draw no tourist's eye. Moats build tract housing in the grooves of vinyl. An eerie calm prevails, not tomb-like, shrinal. I come for solace. Far and back, vitrines hold universal monsters safely penned. Vampires, mummies, wolfmen, every friend of anxious childhood, surest of vaccines against the grown-up world's uncertain horrors, which spread like scentless, soundless fog before us. And I'm happy to report that the store is back in operation. So we survived that grown-up horror, and you can still get your mummies on Hollywood Boulevard. So shortly after I moved to Tulsa, I received a report from that very same complex, from the Crossroads of the World, that an old disused theater on the other side of the street had burnt down, likely for insurance money. The theater had a very, very strange history. It was for a brief time a porn theater, for a brief time a burlesque theater, for a brief time a foreign art theater, also a theater for first-rate plays in its early days. So it went through the ups and downs of your Hollywood career very, very gracefully until it disappeared. So one of the first poems I wrote after my book came out was an elegy for this old playhouse. It's called Elegy for a Hollywood Playhouse. Even the fire that brought down the dingy theater was set by amateurs. Itself was amateurish, as if the scenery it gnawed just couldn't nourish a 5-alarmer. The 240-seater slid farther from respect each passing year, all without notice from the local drama desks. Here podunk doozies bottomed out in bad burlesque. Bug-bitten socialites realized their families' fears. Now, charred and cratered, it at last takes on some of the grandeur of an Odeon. And then the elegies kept coming. Shortly after that, one of my favorite, this is the only wildlife poem I've written in the past 3 years, and it's still a very urban poem. There was a legendary mountain lion who stalked the hills above Hollywood. His tag was P22, Puma 22. He was injured by a car and was found in someone's backyard, so badly injured that he would not survive, and he was put down. His life out there in the Hollywood Hills, all by his lonesome, brought to mind one of my favorite films, which is Public Enemy. I thought of James Cagney, who also had a kind of feline strength and agility to him, irrepressible strength, and always seemed to end badly in his films, his gangster films at least. So this is a little elegy for that Puma. He'd slinked out of a pre-code film, red tooth, red claw, a handsome brute for whom you knew you shouldn't root, knowing what lay in store for him, knowing that he could never stop the low growl of his appetites. He'd follow them into the heights. It's always lonely at the top, with one way down. The running time is scrawled in ink on every reel. The genre's laws are ironclad. Tell me, how can you help but feel a kinship with the mangy cad whose mere survival is a crime? And that will do for the elegies, I think, except for one. You might, hearing all of these things, think that Hollywood is my only inspiration, and indeed it is my firmest source of inspiration. But occasionally I stray from Hollywood, and I've been straying from Hollywood as a subject more and more. This is a poem on Jewish themes. It's also an elegy of a sort, but really more of a tribute to a poet who was very important to me in my teenage years, Delmore Schwartz, who, like James Cagney, seemed to be filled with a kind of a tiger's energy, and also flamed out very badly toward the end of his life. And the book is a figure from Yiddish folklore, from myth. It is the soul of a sinful Jew that must, after the death of the body, cling to another Jew until its debts are repaid. And in a way, Delmore Schwartz has been clinging to me since I first read him. So this is in his honor. The Dybbuk. From the parched courtyards of our past, they grope towards us in the night. The desperate shades of schnooks, outcast before their debts are paid. One might be in me as I speak, stuck fast. Excuse my cough. It is the strain all overburdened asses feel. Too many souls like sacks of grain strapped to my back. I stagger, kneel in pain, not prayerful, pure and plain. Come, brother Dybbuk, to my trough. Drink up, I'll bear our double heap of guilt before I shuffle off your half of it and make the leap into some other poor doomcough. Not the most cheerful poem, but at least you know that life goes on even after. This poem is a bit more cheerful, and I was inspired by my daughter. I'm the father of twins. They're 3 years old now, just over 3. And in the past year or so, their language has exploded, and they've been repeating everything they hear. They latch on to words so quickly. It's really a marvel to witness. And at one point, I was asking my daughter whether she wanted a single toy or an entire bag of toys that I had prepared for her. And I asked her whether she wanted this one thing or the whole shebang. And she said, "I want the whole shebang." And I was thrilled to hear her repeat it, but then also a little bit disturbed by the fact that she was now speaking in slang at so tender an age. And so this is the poem that came out of it, a villanelle called The Whole Shebang. My daughter says she wants the whole shebang, seizing my flip word like a shiny prize. What father wouldn't feel a certain pang of conscience? She's a bit too young for slang. A toddler and already cracking wise, my daughter says she wants the whole shebang. All that I say comes back, a boomerang, and in its flight the meaning multiplies. What father wouldn't feel a certain pang of pending loss? The girl to whom I sang, still sing each night, the daftest lullabies, my daughter says she wants the whole shebang. Soon I will see her wearing Vera Wang and drowning in another person's eyes, vowing eternal love. I'll feel a pang of pride, of terror. Stuff that storm and drang. Let it all come, and come as a surprise. But when she says she wants the whole shebang, I turn uncertain at the sudden pang. Now, what I'd like to do is read a few poems that aren't my own, but that I have made my own, a few translations from a book that just came out in July last month, almost exactly a month ago, called Passport to Paris and Los Angeles Poems. And what it is the reproduction, the republication of a absolutely brilliant, captivating memoir of emigre life and of a career in show business in both popular and classical music by Vernon Duke, who was born like myself in the Eastern Europe, grew up like myself in what is now Ukraine, and emigrated in 1917, 1918 after the Russian Revolution, fled really with his family, fled certain death, and ended up first in Constantinople, then in New York, then in Paris, then back to New York, and then eventually at the end of his life in California. Throughout, he built a glorious career in show business. He wrote some of the finest standards in the American Songbook, including April in Paris, Autumn in New York. For Autumn in New York, he actually wrote not just the music, but the lyrics. His English was as good as his Russian, but he felt more comfortable in Russian, especially when writing poems, which he had been doing from childhood on. And at the end of his life, in the last very, very happy decade of his life, when he finally found the love of his life, a much younger woman whom he married, who survived him and still alive today, Kay Duke Ingalls. By that time, he returned to poetry, his first love, even before music, and wrote some really wildly funny, very touching, unique poems, many of them about California and about his happy life, some of them looking back on his childhood. It's the poems that combine both that look back and that newfound happiness that have that double exposure quality so common to emigre poetry that move me most. And one of the poems that I've translated for this book, of 20 poems at the end of this book in my translation, is precisely that. And it's called Natur Mort, the still life. And it has him sitting on the beach in Santa Monica, which he loved. Is this Crimea? Is it the Pacific? Same salty water, same sweet sun, same view. A picture postcard seaside panorama beneath the same clear sky, same shade of blue. The water has the smell of fresh cucumbers. A jellyfish coils like a blown glass snake. Rising behind him with its snowy lining, a wave's thick shirt descends to overtake and drape a swimmer. On the shore, a crab offers his well-worn communistic greeting, and millions of fish with crimson gills commence their international's big meeting. Yet in Alupka, I was but a boy, while Santa Monica's my denouement. The smoke of time swirls like a curly cloud above the figure of a tanned old man who lies with fingers laced behind his head. He smiles, recalling his unlikely story. America, Crimea, does it matter where I cross over into purgatory? And the last of his poems that I'll read here is just a very funny, very evocative portrait of a star past her prime. It's called Sunset Strip. Poor lady is in tatters, disheveled and distressed, a star of yesterday. Abandoned by the cameras, no wonder she's depressed. Her heart is drained away. Look all you like, no matter, won't guess how old she is. Her dress is dull and gray. Despite her stately manners, she can't keep up appearances without her former pay. Her days drag on, relentless. Her eyes look tired and lifeless. Her furs are worn and frayed. Oh, Hollywood, how horrid. Lord, work your little wonders. Restore her faded fame. And I'll end on that.
Boris, you're fabulous. You have so much love in your heart. You love Hollywood, and your translations, you make everything new, and you see things with, as many immigrants do, you see things with fresh eyes. And so you make us appreciate them more. Sometimes middle-class Americans tend to take things for granted, but it's always great to see things with fresh eyes. And there's such a sense of wonder in your heart and in your vision. And you're a true literary camarado. You're always caring for other poets, in your translations. And so thank you for that. You're just a brilliant poet and a brilliant translator. I mean, I say that without knowledge because obviously I don't know Russian, but I sense that, if I may. So we have some time left. So I will ask you the same two questions I asked DA. Is there a book or two that you return to often in poetry?
Well, yes. In fact, today happens to be the birthday of one of my favorite poets, Donald Justice, and his collected poems I return to very frequently. I've learned a great deal from him. He passed away in 2004. But I have been reading him constantly. I probably once a week I return to the book to learn something about nuance of expression, about form, about the power of phrasing. He's really a great teacher, has been a great teacher to me, although I never met him. So his collected poems are very important to me.
And then what about a foreign film or two that you really love?
Well, just the other day, for some reason, a film about childhood popped into my head. I hadn't seen it in a very long time, but when I first saw it, it really made me weep. It was such a glorious evocation of childhood. It's a Swedish film called Hugo and Josephine from the 1960s, and hardly known here, but worth seeking out. A really tremendous film. Something I think anyone could enjoy. So that's one I deeply love.
I love your love for Hollywood. I grew up on American movies, but once I went to New York, looking at movies at the Thalia, the New Yorker, the Little Carnegie.
Oh, sure.
Leone, Godard, Bergman, on and on. And so I always love that in your soul too.
And I'll say Day for Night is a great film about filmmaking, probably the best film about filmmaking made outside of Hollywood.
One time in between shots, I was working with Roger Corman on several pictures, but this one in particular, I asked him, who's your favorite filmmaker? And he said, the Russian. And I said, who, Eisenstein? He said, yes. And I said, so that's great. So, DA, why don't you come on and we can have a talk with you and Boris and me, if you like. So what's the difference do you find most importantly in Tulsa as compared to LA, Boris, before we go on with you two?
Sure. Well, I was very reluctant to leave Los Angeles, but also excited to live somewhere else. Luckily, Tulsa, in some ways looks like a miniature Los Angeles. There are so many bonds and links and communications in both directions between Oklahoma and California. Such a movement of peoples back and forth that much of the architecture I see here, well, it looks an awful lot like the architecture I saw around me in Los Angeles. It's just on a much smaller scale. The city has a population of about 500,000 people. So imagine driving down Los Angeles' streets in the mid 20s or mid 30s and seeing very few cars on the road. That's how I feel driving down the streets of Tulsa. It feels like Los Angeles, but kind of scraped back in time to an earlier era.
Well, I grew up in the Midwest, and I was always, DA may have alluded to it earlier in his poem, or actually explicitly said, I live in a little town, 8,000 population surrounded by wheat fields and, the long roads, wheat fields on each side. And I remember sitting at a cafe on east or west side and midnight drinking a Coke and listening to the jukebox and saying, one of these days I'm going to get as far as away I can from this town, but always loving the people that I grew up with in the town. So, let's stick with you two. Boris, you said something earlier about DA. So DA, why don't you start the conversation about Boris's poetry or the reading, and then vice versa?
Well, one of the things two things. First of all, Boris, thank you for including the poetry of Vernon Duke, someone that I know a great deal about as a composer and lyricist, and not as much about his poetry. So I'm really excited for the work that you're doing. I love listening to your poems because you have such an uncanny ear for the ways in which words speak to one another. And for example, in the villanelle about your daughter's language acquisition, the whole shebang, the way that you bring those sounds back with like Vera Wang, is like you're such a masterful inventor, and I love that you don't go for the obvious thing. You go for the strange and unexpected, and it makes your poems have this kind of gem-like quality.
Oh gosh, if I could get that in writing, I'd really appreciate it. Thank you very much.
Next blurb, right?
Yeah. I'll be knocking on your door.
Okay.
Thank you very much. That means so much to me coming from you, and I think you know why. You have everything that you've just ascribed to me. You have that in spades.
Oh, well, thank you so much. We should do a reading together when your new book comes out.
I'd love that.
Maybe we can come down to Hollywood and
yes.
And you can show me some of the marvelous old architecture that I've missed on my trips down there, because I do see a lot, but I love to be, paired up with locals because they know where everything is.
Absolutely. I feel the same way.
Yeah.
Well, I was also glad you brought up Delmore Schwartz. I studied him in college. He and Randall Gerald and Lowell and Biederman, they were four, if not the best, arguably quite up there at the top of their generation. Mm-hmm. So I'm thankful that you brought him up. So what else would you like to talk about, Boris, in terms of seeing things anew in Tulsa? What do you see out there that just strikes you right now?
Well, I see a lot of vernacular architecture talking about architecture. There are, giant lumberjacks and beautiful old signs all around town. And there's a kind of Art Deco wonderland of a downtown. The city was really boomed in the 1920s, and between the 20s and 30s, as a stop on Route 66, also it exploded architecturally. It became an Art Deco sensation. People drove out of their way just to see this marvelous skyline that we have here. So it's a great privilege to be able to live among these old beauties. From the 20s through the 40s. But I also love, the jukeboxes and the dive bars and that life that you describe, Harry. My father-in-law, he grew up, he passed away, unfortunately, not so long ago, but he grew up in a small town in Kansas, just across the way here. And growing up, his phone number was 54. So you can imagine how small his town was, and so he filled me with a love for small town ways, and so I really appreciate the chance to be closer to that kind of lifestyle here.
And, I think somebody should do a study, because there was such a diaspora of creative people leaving the Midwest in the 30s because of depression and Dust Bowl and environmental stuff. And I wonder how much of the things that we have in Los Angeles and Southern California really owe their genesis to that exodus.
I'll tell you one very, very quick story. There is a particular place that is directly linked to that exodus, and it is the old silent movie theater right across the street from my high school, from Fairfax High on Fairfax Avenue. Right now, it's an art house art house theater, but it was throughout my high school years a silent movie theater, and it was built from the ground up by two expats from Oklahoma who arrived in 1939, 1940, and built this theater with their hands, a husband and wife, and ran it, saving scores and scores of other films that would otherwise be lost in the theater, and screening them every day. So that's a direct link between Oklahoma and Los Angeles, and a kind of shared love of the big screen between these two places.
Well, the last movie I saw there was Metropolis. It was more vertical screen than horizontal.
Yes.
And I sat in the front row on one of those comfortable sofas looking up at it. But our time is up. You two are just two of my favorite poets, and I just love listening and seeing both of you. You're just, you're great. And so it's always such a deep pleasure and honor when you come on our show. So thank you once again.
Harry, you are the best host. You are the best host.
D.A. Powell and Boris Dralyuk. And here's our great director, Jennifer Clymer. Thank you.
Harry, you can't leave until you tell us what's up next week.
Next week, we have two wonderful poets, Lynn Thompson, Poet Laureate, L.A., and Dinah Berlin. So they're both fabulous women poets, or poets, let's just say poets. We're all in it together. So thank you all.
Thank you. Thank you both so much for being with us, and hopefully we see you again very soon.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.